The most terrifying villains of all time, Anton Chigurh, No Country for Old Men. Anton Chigurh is the personification of destiny that cannot be avoided. He walks around the world with an unsettling calmness, using an air-powered bolt rifle as if it were a part of him. He murders not out of wrath or passion, but simply because it is what he does. His ideology is unsettling. It reduces life and death to a simple coin flip, removing all morality and emotion from the equation. His cold, almost robotic attitude toward murder is what makes him one of the most disturbing villains to ever appear on television. He is the embodiment of death, moving among us without any feelings of regret or reluctance. It is just an unavoidable fact. Johan Liebert, Monster. Monsters don't always wear masks. Some people conceal their true selves in plain sight, wearing a grin so beguiling that you would never realize the horror that lies behind. Johan Liebert is a prime illustration of this. He is a guy of such intelligence and persuasive ability that he can drive people to frenzy with nothing but his words. He has no need for firearms. His intelligence is sharper than any sword, and his ability to manipulate others into self-destruction is genuinely scary. His complete absence of humanity is what makes him so unsettling. He is not only bad, he is the emptiness where a soul should be. He doesn't shout or hurry. His wickedness is methodical, intentional, and unavoidable. Frank Booth, Blue Velvet. Frank Booth is the embodiment of chaos. One minute he is laughing, and the next minute he is shouting in your face. His violent behavior is erratic, and his goals are so twisted that they are impossible to understand. Frank is different from other villains who have obvious reasons for their actions. He isn't concerned about power or revenge. He just wants to enjoy devastation. He is one of the most unsettling villains to see because of his weird combination of infantile outbursts and ruthless sadism. You can never predict what will happen next when Frank Booth appears on screen. That is what makes him so frightening. He is not someone you can reason with or foresee. The only thing you can do is survive him. Ramsay Bolton, Game of Thrones. Ramsay Bolton is one of the most cruel and sadistic characters ever written, embodying a level of depravity that makes even the most hardened villains seem tame in comparison. He doesn't just kill, he breaks people in the most excruciating ways possible, reveling in their suffering as if it were his form of entertainment. His greatest pleasure comes not from power or conquest, but from complete and utter domination over his victims, mentally, physically, and spiritually. What makes Ramsay even more terrifying is that he isn't a mindless brute driven by impulse. He is coldly intelligent, dangerously strategic, and disturbingly creative in his cruelty. Every act of torment he commits is calculated, designed not just to hurt, but to dismantle his victims piece by piece until they are nothing more than a hollow shell. His ability to manipulate, deceive, and toy with those around him makes him far more dangerous than a simple sadist. He is a predator who enjoys the slow, agonizing destruction of his prey. Patrick Bateman, American Psycho. Patrick Bateman is the epitome of unrestrained narcissism taken to the most violent extreme. During the day, he is a prosperous businessman. At night, he is a ruthless murderer who feels no guilt. His killings are not the only thing that makes him frightening. It is also the fact that he fits into society so well. He has a high-status profession, a nice smile, and immaculate suits, yet he is completely lacking in empathy. He is evidence that the most deadly beasts do not necessarily hide in the shadows. They may be found among us at times, concealing themselves behind a flawless front and seeming just like everyone else. That is the most disturbing aspect of the situation. The Tethered, us. Picture yourself gazing into a mirror and seeing not only your own image, but also a version of yourself that has been distorted by grief and suffering. The Tethered represents everything of the things we attempt to hide, our most sinister tendencies, our concealed anger, and our unexpressed anxieties. They don't only want to murder us, they want to take our place and enjoy the lives that were denied to them. Nothing is more terrifying than confronting a creature that is, at its essence, you. And what is the most frightening thought? They could be more deserving of it than we are. Hannibal Lecter, The Silence of the Lambs. Dr. Hannibal Lecter is a man of unsettling paradoxes. He is sophisticated yet savage, courteous yet utterly merciless. His refined demeanor, impeccable taste, and cultured intellect make it easy to forget the darkness lurking beneath the surface. He isn't just a cannibal, he is a master of psychological warfare, a predator who hunts with words long before he ever lifts a blade. With an eerie calmness, he dissects the minds of those around him, exploiting their fears, weaknesses, and desires with surgical precision. Unlike most villains, Hannibal doesn't need to chase his victims. They willingly step into his web, drawn in by his intelligence, charm, and unnerving charisma. He is a puppet master, pulling the strings so subtly that by the time his victims realize they're ensnared, their fate is already sealed. His ability to manipulate extends beyond individuals. He deceives even the most brilliant minds in law enforcement, turning the game of cat and mouse into a deadly art form. The Joker, the Dark Knight. Some villains are motivated by a desire for power, while others seek revenge. What about the Joker? All he wants is anarchy. He has no master plan or ulterior motives. He just has an unquenchable desire to see the planet go up in flames. His unpredictability is what makes him so frightening. He strips away the illusion of control, proving that even the most righteous can be broken with the right push. He doesn't care, therefore you can't reason with him or negotiate with him. He is not just a villain, he is a force of nature, a personification of chaos. Vecna, Stranger Things. Vecna is a being that represents trauma and decay. He preys on the pain and guilt of his victims before pulling them into his nightmarish grasp. His presence is overwhelming, and his speech is filled with hatred. His great strength is not the only thing that makes him genuinely terrible. It is also the way he breaks his victims from the inside out by twisting their brains. He is the embodiment of terror, devouring misery as if it were a feast. He pointed out the weakest point in Max. Pennywise, IT. Pennywise is more than simply a clown. He is the embodiment of terror, hiding in the shadows and ready to attack when you are caught off guard. He doesn't simply murder, he toys with his victims, tormenting them and feeding off their fear. And worst of all, he has a lot of patience. He sits and watches, knowing that in the end, everyone is terrified of something. And when the moment arrives, he will be there, smiling, prepared to consume your soul. To Pennywise, fear is not just a tool, it is his sustenance. He thrives on it, relishes it, and molds it into something far worse than death itself. Because when Pennywise comes for you, he doesn't just take your life, he devours your very soul, leaving nothing but the echo of your screams in the dark. Which of these characters would you like to meet in your dream if you are brave enough to bear the risk? Like the series? Please tell us in the comments.